Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together.
Can one really fix the relationship with self? That's what we're going to be talking about. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and with me is Kamini Wood. Welcome, Kamini.
Thank you, Noreen.
And she is a professional certified coach. Now, tell us a little bit more about that, Kamini, because the terminology coach is used in so many different contexts now. So just give people an idea of what context you're referring to.
Absolutely. So I work with individuals on healing that relationship with themselves in order to find success in work or business, as well as really being able to build healthy relationships with others. I truly believe that in order to do that, in order to find joy and happiness, we have to have that solid foundation with self. So as a coach, I am working with them to unpack certain either false beliefs or limiting beliefs that might be keeping them from being able to live into the life that they truly want for themselves.
Okay. How long have you been doing this?
Well, the honest answer is I've been doing it for over 20 years because in all aspects of my work, I have always had an element of working with individuals on becoming their best self. In truth, I've run my own coaching business for the last 4 years.
Okay. And before we get into the conversation, why did you decide to do this?
So I decided to do this for a combination of things. One, in my professional life, I kept finding myself in these roles where I was working with individuals on creating ways for them to live into the goals and the aspirations that they had. On a personal level, I was myself a people-pleasing perfectionist. And through my own life's experiences and being a mother and having my own children start emulating those people-pleasing behaviors, I realized that I needed to make certain shifts within myself and how I saw myself, respected myself. So that self-transformation combined with the professional work and that professional calling really created this ultimate calling for me to really take that and work with individuals one-on-one to help them truly live into exactly who they're meant to be.
So this has a professional component, but this is really basically your life's calling then, because it is out of your own experience that you're doing this too.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. So can one really fix the relationship with self? And just broadly describe what self is in this context.
So in this context, self is really, how we see ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we respect ourselves.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to as self.
Okay.
And absolutely, we can heal that relationship with self. What that really entails, though, is bringing to the awareness certain false beliefs that we may have about ourselves. And when I say false beliefs, I'm talking about things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I don't belong, I'm invisible. Those are all false beliefs. And when we can bring those to the awareness, and then we can start challenging them and really asking, are those really true? And what do I actually know to be true about myself? That's the starting point, because now we're bringing that to the awareness. Now we can actually acknowledge, accept that was there. Now we start asking ourselves, what's actually true, and what aligned actions are we going to take to live into what's actually true? And the way that we really then start working on that healing the relationship is really dialing into things like, how do I feel? What do I need? and being able to self-source those things. So it's really about releasing the concept of outsourcing trust, outsourcing our worth, outsourcing validation, and it's about self-sourcing those things.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Photography is an art, but more so, photography must come from the heart. Precious moments, priceless times. Take a pic and know it will turn out fine. For beautiful captures, email us at bmcphotographyja@gmail.com or call us at 876-350-7089. BMC Photography JA. Beautiful moments captured.
You said earlier the whole idea that false beliefs and all of that. There is this concept though that different disciplines describe it as different things, but in communication, the whole idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. So even if it is, and of course there is power in one's words. So if it is that somebody is constantly being told that they're this, they're that, and they're not worthwhile and all of that, do you think in some way that can actually become true because of that is what they then believe?
Absolutely. We see it constantly in toxic relationships, for instance. In toxic relationships, when you're consistently being told what you're doing is not enough or is not good enough, or, we see it in narcissistic relationships a lot where the narcissistic partner puts the other one down, or even with narcissistic parents, what ends up happening is the receiver of that starts to believe that that's actually true. And so then their own self-talk starts to demonstrate to them that they're not good enough, or they're not worthy, or that they don't belong, or that they're invisible. And so you're right, it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy.
So how then, which is what we're talking about, how then do you fix that though? And is this a step-by-step process? Is it just, you go step 1, step 2, step 3, or is it, really almost like a cycle? How would you then describe that process?
Well, so the way that we interrupt it, because it is a cycle, right? Okay. The only way to interrupt it is to pattern interrupt, and to simply actually start challenging and saying, well, what's actually true? So when that false story or false belief of I'm not good enough pops up, we can start tracking it back and saying, well, where does that come from? And whose voice is that? And is that just something I experienced in a message I took on when I was younger, for instance? And we can actually start challenging it and saying, well, that might have been the experience when I was 6 or 7, but now as an adult, what do I know to be true about? Know to be true about who I am and how I show up. And also, who do I want to be? We start really taking charge. We have to move from victimhood into ownership of self, right? Because if we continually think that things are happening to us, we stay in that cycle. If we're willing to say, okay, what's my part in this dynamic? How am I showing up? And then really taking control over how do I choose to show up? Now we're starting to interrupt that.
I loved what you said just now, moving from victim to ownership of self, but how easy is that process though, Kamini? Because it takes a strong sense of self to actually take ownership of self.
You're right. It's not an easy process. That's something that does take time. It's not something that happens overnight. There's not an easy button, so to speak, to do it, but it's a commitment to self. It's a commitment to saying, I want to live into what's possible for myself, and I'm choosing that. And so when we start asking and seeing that life is happening for us and not to us, for instance, when we start recognizing that things aren't, if we can actually ask ourselves, how am I showing up and contributing to this story, for instance? How do I treat myself as not good enough? How do I talk to myself on a daily basis where I'm telling myself I'm not good enough? And then recognizing that I'm choosing to no longer do that. I'm choosing to recognize the value that I bring, and my worth is already existent just in my being, right? We are already worthy beings because of who we are. And it's really just taking ownership of that and saying, okay, now that I know that, how do I choose to show up today?
Do you think though that, for example, if there are persons who it is because of who they're surrounded with, whether family or even co-workers, or even if they're at school, they're the ones who continue to feed into that negative side of you, negative side of self, so to speak.
Yep.
And it is not so easy for you to move away from all of this negativity. Yeah. So how then do you try to fix this relationship when it is that you're really just surrounded and you're really, for some people, they can move away. For others, it's not possible. So how can you really then just, fix that when you're really surrounded by what is, the opposite?
I love that question, because it's true. Sometimes we can't remove ourselves from the situation. We can't remove other people from our environment, and we can't control what they say to us. But what we can do is set our own personal boundaries. And I don't just mean physical boundaries. I even mean energetic boundaries. It's about setting energetic boundaries such that we don't take in what other people are saying. It almost becomes a mantra, right? Where we almost say to ourselves, "Oh, thanks for sharing." Where that thanks for sharing is, here's my energetic boundary. You can share and say what you will, but I'm going to choose what I let in and what I don't. It's literally having this almost, it's an imaginary wall, but it's an energetic wall of what I'm choosing to allow in and what I'm not. And that's what I mean by ownership. Just because somebody says something to us doesn't mean we have to choose to believe it. Just because we think a thought, we don't have to give more energy to that thought. We always have a choice.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor. So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com. I know there's somebody who's listening and saying, boy, you two ladies sound as if you have a strong sense of self, so it's easy for you to say that. I'm still here, maybe 20, 30, 15, 16, still trying to develop, this whole idea of self. So, it's easy. Y'all are making it sound so easy. What's your response to somebody like that?
I get it, because I was the same way. I was like, I don't know how to shift that. I don't know how to shift this people-pleasing perfectionist attitude I have. And let me be clear, the people-pleasing comes from a feeling of you have to make others happy to prove your worth. So I understand full well from my own personal experience that if my story was I had to continually make others happy. I had to avoid conflict in order to prove that I was enough and I was worthy. Here's the thing. If you put the actual time and energy into it and you're willing to challenge that way, is it true that I have to make others happy in order to prove my worth? Or am I already worthy because of who I am? And I can show up and contribute to other people's happiness, but it's not my responsibility to make them happy.
Love that.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's that mindset shift that allows us to heal that relationship with self.
Love that. And as we're wrapping up, if it is that you did say it's a cycle, but if it is that you could describe it as, let's say, a 3-step cycle, what would those 3 steps be?
Well, normally in the cycle process, what ends up happening is, we have that false belief, and then somebody continues to feed into that, and we continue to have those negative thoughts about ourselves. So the 3-step process to make it actually an interrupted cycle is, catching it when we're triggered into the false center, noticing it, becoming an observer of it. We're not here to judge it. We're just here to observe it, notice it, become aware of it, and then we challenge it. We think about it flexibly. Is there another way that I can look at this? Or what is actually true about myself? So that's how we interrupt the cycle. And from that place, when we actually ask ourselves what's really true about ourselves, we are in a more empowered place to then say, what's my commitment to moving myself forward? What's my commitment to myself in order to continue living into who I want to be and who I know myself truly to be?
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Kamini.
Absolutely.
This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next
Mothers
time.
and fathers, making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.